Good morning, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. It's about 4:30 on the West Coast. I get up about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was just going through some news articles here, and I had to come out and talk about the propaganda. I mean, really, the propaganda that is being pushed through the mainstream media, talking about the Fed's policy and what they are going to do with interest rates is it's not a surprise to me anymore, but it's really astonishing to see how much of it and how prevalent it is going through the mainstream media right now. It is obvious that they are trying to push this idea, this narrative that they are going to be cutting interest rates sooner than later, and that the Federal Reserve is not going to be waiting for a 2% inflation target before they start to adjust rates. It's just like it's almost frustrating to the point that I keep coming out here almost it feels a lot like I'm putting out the same videos over and over again, right? But yet when I see this misunderstanding, this like I don't even know how to even call it anymore, like this pushing of misinformation to guide the markets, this credible threat, it is so obvious to me. I just don't see it any other way. Like I literally cannot see it any other way other than the credible threats coming from the Federal Reserve. There has been nothing that has changed, but yet the markets will anticipate this rate cut and will start to act as if those rate cuts have already taken place, regardless of what the Federal Reserve does at this point. All right. They will have committed to themselves to that belief and will then start acting in accordance to it. Right. Now, something I find very interesting about the statement alone, the Fed won't wait to 2% till they get to 2%. Right. The Fed won't wait till 2%. No kidding. Right. This is something that I have been saying for a long time. Average inflation rate, average inflation targeting over time would say that. They won't be waiting for 2%. They don't even look at 2%. They don't even think about that anymore. The 2% inflation target is not a target. It's not anything to them. Right? 2% average inflation rate over time. That's what the Federal Reserve is shooting for. So that means appropriate monetary policy may not be 2%. In fact, appropriate monetary policy could consistently from now on, according to average inflation rate over time, be either 3% or 1% forever and still be achieving the 2% average inflation rate over time. This is really where I think most people are just truly losing it when it comes to understanding the monetary policy. They look at this mainstream media, they hear all these economists out there, they listen to these little snippets of information that are coming out that lead them to believe a particular direction, but it is false. It is not what the Federal Reserve is going for. Let me read this to you. I've read this so many times, and I know if you are a follower of my channel, you have heard me say this, but we have got to put this out for the video, right? This is coming from Powell's speech, August 27th of 2020. This is when they changed the way that they conduct themselves when it comes to the inflation. See, up until this date, they looked at a 2% target. That if the Federal Reserve had a monetary policy that failed to achieve the 2% target, they would adjust monetary policy to achieve that 2% target and let bygones be bygones. If they fail to achieve it, so be it, right? They would go forward with the idea that they are trying to hit this 2% target. So if they were above 2% on inflation, they would try and tighten up monetary policy to bring inflation back down to 2%. If they were under 2% inflation, they would stimulate the economy to try and bring it up to 2%, maintaining a 2%. That came to an end back in August of 2020. In fact, it was a few days before that. But he goes on to say this. We have also made important changes with regard to the price stability side of our mandate. Our long-run goal continues to be inflation rate of 2%. Right? This is what Powell was saying back in August of 2020. Right? Our long-run goal continues to be inflation of 2%. Our statement emphasizes that our actions to achieve both sides of the dual mandate will be most effective if the long-term inflation expectations, right? Not the inflation. This is the expectations is what he's talking about right here. If the long-term inflation expectations remain well anchored at 2%. However, if inflation runs below 2% following economic downturns, but never moves above 2% even when the economy is strong, then over time, inflation will average less than 2%. Households and businesses will come to expect this result, meaning that inflation expectations would tend to move below our inflation goal and pull realized inflation down. So right there is what he's saying. It's just like if inflation stays consistently low, then the households and businesses and everybody else will expect that. And that inflation expectation being persistently low is a problem. Because in the end of it, inflation expectation is a self-fulfilling prophecy, both on the up and down side. To prevent this outcome and adverse dynamics that could ensue, our new statement indicates that we will seek to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time. Therefore, periods when inflation has been running below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. In seeking to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, we are not tying ourselves to a particular mathematical formula that defines the average. Thus, our approach could be viewed as a flexible form of average inflation targeting. Our decision about appropriate monetary policy will continue to reflect a broad array of considerations and will not be dictated by any formula. Of course, if excessive inflationary pressures were to build or inflation expectations were to ratchet above levels consistent with our goal, we would not hesitate to act. So now, and just to be clear, this statement, what I just read there, was pretty much reiterated by Michelle Bowman just about a month ago, a little over a month ago. And so the Federal Reserve is in no view whatsoever of a 2% target. That's not what they're going for. And so as every single mainstream media, propagandist, article, and economist, and everything out there keeps talking about trying to achieve this 2% inflation targeting goal, right? They are missing what it is that the 2% goal really is, since it's an inflation rate over time with no mathematical formula to actually figure it out. And appropriate monetary policy during times of persistently low inflation like we experienced for the previous decade prior to the pandemic, appropriate monetary policy would seek to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. Now, understanding that the Fed has a dual mandate, low and stable prices and full employment. Now, the question about full employment is very questionable. Now, you can go and ask just about anybody out there on the street, and they're going to tell you that employment is much higher than the unemployment is much higher than what the official statements are, right? The official stats or data or whatever is coming out. I don't disagree. I totally agree with that 100%, that there is a lot more unemployment out there than what the official numbers are saying. However, understanding that we are not in charge of monetary policy, it doesn't matter what we think, what we see, what we know, we are not the ones who are going to be voting on monetary policy. These guys are, right? The FOMC is going to be voting on monetary policy. And by understanding what it is that the FOMC is looking at will give us a better understanding of what it is that they will be voting on and for what reasons. They see unemployment at around 4%. This is still not bad, right? Is it great? No, not by any means, but it's not bad comparatively to what we have experienced in the past. So are we at full employment? Probably not. There could probably be a few more jobs out there, but when you look at it from the Federal Reserve side of things and their monetary policy, I think they're coming in real good, real close to what they are expecting from their monetary or from their dual mandate, or what Congress is expecting from their dual mandate. Now, again, whether that's great for us or not, that's not up to us to decide, right? I mean, we can say, hey, man, it sucks for us, and we know that, right? We're aware of that part of it. However, we can't convince the Federal Reserve to look at it differently. That's not going to happen. I don't care how much you put out shadow stats, stuff and tell everybody how much it really is the real way. It's not going to change. It's not going to change the way the Fed looks at it, and it's not going to change the way that they conduct their monetary policy. I don't care how much you scream at them. Right? So understanding that this is really what the real monetary policy is, and that is to seek an inflation rate that is over time, right? Which means that inflation expectation has to stay persistently high in order for that inflation to be achieving the 2% target over time, considering what we had experienced prior to the pandemic, which was persistently low inflation rate. This whole situation really did a number to the Fed's monetary policy, as it really essentially destroyed the ability for them to stimulate the economy with the dropping of interest rates since they hit the lower bound of zero. See, after the great financial crisis of 2008, the Federal Reserve had essentially lost it, but nobody really knew it, right? Nobody really understood how bad of a situation that the Federal Reserve had truly ended up in, considering that the lower bound of zero basically made it so that their monetary policy was no longer an effective tool. It was done. Like, monetary policy from the Federal Reserve is adjustment of interest rates, raising, lowering interest rates, balance sheet adjustments, but ultimately that's it. Like, quantity of money level, stuff like that. But they don't really have any other tools outside of that interest rate adjustment, right? Balance sheet adjustment. So the amount of quantity of money and the interest rates that are set by it. And if they lose control of the interest rates, well, that's it. Right? That's their entire monetary policy going to hell right there. And so when it came to the great financial crisis and hitting the lower bound of zero, right, when the Fed funds rate essentially went to zero, that was it. They were done. So it was at that point that they knew it was going to be more about their communications. And they knew this was going to take place. This wasn't like a surprise to them. In fact, Ben Bernanke had a great speech where he gave it all away back in 2002, and it's called Deflation and How to Prevent It from Ever Occurring Here, right? And now the way that he describes how to prevent it from ever occurring is by using something. Well, he used the story of a guy with a gold machine, but it's essentially using the words, right? The words of the Federal Reserve, the use of the communication, how they communicate it to the public. Let me read this to you, right? So this is what Ben Bernanke had to say about a deflationary scenario where the Federal Reserve would no longer have the effective tool of being able to stimulate the economy with interest rate adjustments. Typically, if they drop interest rates, that would get the inflation moving, right? Lower interest rates, more people out there buying houses, cars, going on vacation, getting the economy moving again, right? So he knew back in 2002 that there would come a point, like they were watching the Fed funds rates drop and dropping, and they're like, it's only a matter of time before this thing hits zero, right? And then we won't be able to drop it anymore. And they're like, okay, well, let's come up with an idea of what it is that we can do. What is it that we can do if the lower bound is reached and we can no longer use our interest rate adjustments to stimulate the economy or to guide the markets? What are we going to do? This is what he had to say. Again, 2002, right? This is 22 years ago. I have mentioned some observers have concluded that when a central bank policy rate falls to zero, its practical minimum, monetary policy loses its ability to further stimulate aggregate demand and the economy, right? So once they hit the lower bound of zero, no more buying houses, cars, and going on vacation, right? That's it. It's over. At a broad conceptual level, and in my view, in practice as well, this conclusion is clearly mistaken. Indeed, under fiat, that is, paper money system, a government, in practice, the central bank, in cooperation with other agencies, should always be able to generate increased nominal spending and inflation, even when the short-term nominal interest rate is at zero. So they figured it out. They were like, no, wait a minute, huh? See, if we hit zero, we're in trouble because we can't adjust monetary policy anymore to stimulate demand, right? Aggregate demand would come to an end, essentially, because you can't go any further below zero. No more houses, cars, and going on vacation. But he says, no way. Under a fiat currency, a determined government and central bank can always, right? Let me see. Be able to generate, always be able to generate increased nominal spending and inflation, even when the short-term nominal interest rate is at zero. So they had a plan. They knew it. We hit zero. It's okay. I'll tell you. Here's my plan. Before I tell you what my plan is, let me tell you this little story first, because this is going to give you a better idea of how the plan is going to work. This is what Ben Bernanke is saying. All right. The conclusion that when deflation is always reversible under a fiat money system follows from basic economic reasoning. A little parable may prove useful. Today, an ounce of gold sells for $300 more or less. Remember, this was 22 years ago, so it's $2,400 now, but back in 2002, it was $300. More or less. Now suppose that a modern alchemist solves his subject's oldest problem by finding a way to produce unlimited amounts of new gold at essentially no cost. Right? So he's just making up the story that let's just imagine that a guy can produce this machine, right, that produces gold, and it's like, he produces this gold at almost no cost, right? It's very little energy or cost coming out of this thing. So he's making gold for free, right? Moreover, his investment is widely publicized, right? Widely publicized, right? Make sure everybody knows about it, and scientifically verified. Oh, make sure that everybody concludes, like, all the people who know, right, who are in the know, they conclude, they make sure that this is accurate. Right? Just think about what's happening with what's going on right now, right? With the propaganda in the mainstream media and all the economists out there with their 2% target. All right, now, sorry. Back to it. Moreover, his invention is widely publicized and scientifically verified. He announces his intention to begin massive production of gold within days. What would happen to the price of gold? Presumably, potentially unlimited supply of cheap gold would cause the market price of gold to plummet. Indeed, if the market for gold is any degree efficient, the price of gold would collapse immediately after the announcement of the invention, before the alchemist had produced and marketed a single ounce of the yellow metal. Right? That right there, understanding this is what they were going to use for their monetary policy, was their words, their signaling, their forward guidance, the jawboning, the credible threats, right? Gaslighting, straight up. They said it. They said, this is what we are going to do. Now, we take a look, we just step back for just a second, knowing that they are going to be using their words to try and stimulate the economy because the adjustment of interest rates was no longer an effective tool. Yes, they do have their Fed funds rate back up to a higher level, but there's something else that blocks them from using, and it's called the neutral interest rate. Whole other thing. We know how this Fed funds works. We understand that the lowering of interest rates typically would stimulate the economy. It was proven to them a while ago that it doesn't work anymore. Knowing that they had to come up with other tools, they have their jawboning, their forward guidance, their communication tools. This is their main policy tool, not the adjustment of interest rates, right? But the forward guidance, the belief of it, that really stimulates the economy. We found this out at the end of last year, when everybody talked about how many times have you read an article or heard an economist talk about the Powell pivot? How many times have you heard this? Like, I haven't seen it yet. And I've been hearing about the Powell pivot for over a year. Like, soon as they stopped raising rates, it was a Powell pivot. Then it was a Powell pivot at the end of last year when they said that they were going to be dropping interest rates 7 points or whatever, and the dot plot came out. That right there, that little communication that was spread massively throughout the mainstream media, stimulated the economy. It literally eased financial conditions. by the Fed's own statements. They said the easing of financial conditions late last year. There was no easing of financial conditions other than the market's perception of what was taking place within the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, which was completely false. They didn't get it right. They believed that there was going to be 7 rate cuts, literally, right? They went out and bought houses with the idea that they were going to be adjusting interest rates in the future and they would be able to refinance their mortgages. I was hearing people talk about real estate agents using that as a sales tactic. You'll be able to adjust your rates going into the future when they cut. They've already promised 7 rate cuts. They pushed this information out there and the markets believed it. And it's happening again right now. You know, you think about it. Okay, this is something else. This is why you know that the interest rate cuts won't do anything, is because even if they were to cut rates right now, it doesn't stimulate the economy. And the reason is because there's something called the neutral interest rate. And this is a very difficult thing to wrap your head around, and it's even harder to understand what the level of it is because there is no place to go to that says this is the neutral interest rate as of today. The neutral interest rate is the rate that is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. It's neutral. And that neutral interest rate prior to the pandemic had fallen very close to zero, meaning that when the Fed dropped interest rates, they would hit the lower bound of zero and still not be able to stimulate the economy because they weren't able to get far enough below the neutral interest rate to stimulate the economy. This is a major problem that the Federal Reserve was facing. It's one of the reasons why they weren't able to get the inflationary scenario that they were looking for back after the great financial crisis because the neutral interest rate is at zero and so was the Fed funds rate. They couldn't get far enough below zero to stimulate the economy. Yeah, you saw houses and stocks and bonds and all this other stuff go up, but it was things that you had to borrow money to in order to buy those assets, and those things went up in price, but the standard of living, the regular cost of everything, stayed fairly muted. It was down. Now, again, we can say, oh, no, bull BS, man. Look at all this stuff, and you can give examples of it. That's great. Yeah, I totally agree. However, what the Federal Reserve is looking at for their monetary policy says something very different, and we are not in charge of the monetary policy. They are. They were looking at inflation that was persistently too low rather than too high. This was the major problem because it was too low, meaning that the inflationary scenario had driven the lack of inflation had driven the neutral interest rate further down. And because of this low neutral interest rate being close to zero and the Fed not being able to drop below zero, far enough below the neutral interest rate, meant that stimulating the economy in the traditional fashion in which that they had was no longer working. It just didn't work anymore. And that's the reason why you saw that there was historically low unemployment, and yet the inflationary scenario was not persistent into the economy like everybody would have thought would have taken place prior to the great financial crisis. Like if you had low unemployment, you were almost guaranteed to have high inflation because of that. More people working, more people consuming. When you have more consumption, supply-demand imbalances, boom, right? Price inflation. It's not hard to see. However, if you take inflation or if you take interest rates to zero, unemployment falls very low and you're still not able to get the inflationary scenario that you are looking for, you have run out of monetary policy. You're done. You're cooked. It's over. But you know that you can use your words. You know that the people don't know that the monetary policy had come to an end. The people don't know that. And because they don't know that, it hasn't. Right? The economy gets to function, and the Federal Reserve gets to give this forward guidance. There was a time, like you think about all this communication that is coming out about the Federal Reserve and what they plan on doing into the future. You think they have done almost nothing for almost a year, right? Like they do some balance sheet adjustments here this last month. But prior to that, they have been sitting on their hands the entire time. Look at all the communication about what happens out. Think about all the communication about what the Federal Reserve is going to do. Yet they sit on their hands and do nothing. But yet people don't know that, right? They go off of this idea about the Fed is on the move. They don't know about the Fed. And the Fed, meanwhile, is sitting on their hands going, yeah, I know, right? What? And they're not doing anything. But everybody is just all concerned about it. They're just like all freaked out. They don't have an understanding of what has taken place out there. And so the communication is just completely garbled and obscured and messed up. And everybody is just like, man, when are they going to get to this 2% target? Not realizing that that is a complete illusion. It doesn't mean anything. Like everybody's all focused in on this 2% target. And there isn't one. There is no target. There's like literally nothing. And everybody is all like, all eyes focused right here, right? Everybody's staring at it. Meanwhile, monetary policy is doing something else. They're like, no, don't take your eyes off the target, everybody. Keep your eyes on the target, 2%. Keep that, and like get more mainstream media, and we get more Fed presidents, get everybody out there. Okay, everybody, look at the 2% target, and everybody go, oh, 2% target, and they're like, okay, all right, keep focused on that, guys. All right, that's the markets. Keep focused on that. While we go over here and adjust our monetary policy through the adjustments of words and credible threats and everything else that we do out here. That's gonna be the real monetary policy. So messed up. So messed up. All right. But we on this channel, we've gone through these speeches, we've broken it down, we've put all the pieces from hundreds of speeches together to now come to the understanding of what it is that they are truly up to. Understanding that their monetary policy isn't affected by interest rate adjustments and that it's more about their words, we get to look at their words and say, okay, this is how they're trying to guide the markets. Okay? Knowing that the 2% target is complete delusion. Everybody's all focused, like, man, when are they going to get to the 2%? So they adjust rates, not knowing that none of that stuff makes sense or doesn't even apply. You know? It's just, I don't know. It's crazy to think about, but you know, when you get through it and you find through this information, when you filter through it and you see it, it makes so much more sense. Right? It just like it finally becomes very clear, you know, that the Federal Reserve, like even if they were to adjust those rates, right, we know that they're still so far above the neutral interest rate, they would stay restrictive. A quarter point, half a point, whole point, still far above neutral. In fact, the only way to really get their monetary policy back and in a classical form of which most people would understand it is to have interest rates elevated for a significant amount of time. And if you had inflation expectations running extra high, extra long for an extended period of time, between the combination of all this, it would begin to raise the neutral interest rate, which is somewhat what we are experiencing right now. And so as that neutral interest rate begins to rise, and it does take time and it's slow and you can't observe it taking place, but you can know that if there's elevated inflation and elevated interest rates, then the neutral interest rate is going to rise along with it. Given time, eventually that neutral interest rate will get ever closer to the standing still Fed funds rate and make the economy less restrictive. The gap between the two begins to shrink. See, people wonder why it is we're having this soft landing, or it's like, you know, where's the recession that everybody keeps wondering about and all this other stuff, and inflation's going to destroy us, and the Federal Reserve don't know what they're doing, and all this other stuff. Neutral interest rate rising. Right? Keep pushing that information out there. Keep saying that the Fed don't know what they're doing. Keep saying that they screwed up. Keep saying that they messed that up. Neutral interest rate rises. Right? Totally making the economy less restricted, and the Federal Reserve sitting on their hands saying, I don't know, we might have to wait, 2%'s a little ways off, blah, 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 you know. But knowing it for real, knowing it for what the real intention of what the Federal Reserve is trying to do with the monetary policy, so that they can get their monetary policy back, means that they have to be able to adjust interest rates to stimulate the economy. They can't do it right now. No matter what they do, they're going to be in a restrictive form, all right? No matter what. And so in that sense, it's going to be very difficult to try and stimulate the economy in the sense of like interest rate adjustments during a recession. It just won't, it won't have the effective tool if they cannot get it far enough below the neutral interest rate, unless they can go negative. Like if they had a digital currency and then they can go negative, then yeah, then that changes everything. But that's not the case right now. We still have loads of cash in the system, and there's no central bank digital currency to allow the Fed to go into a negative interest rate with. So this is the policy. This is the real policy of it. Forward guidance, job boning, credible threats, using the mainstream media, the propaganda tool. That is the main policy of the Federal Reserve. Understanding how they cannot use the interest rate adjustments in the fashion that they did before, understanding how that mechanism no longer works, is crucial to understanding the credible threat theory, because most people don't realize that the Fed has lost control, or not necessarily control, but lost the ability to stimulate the economy through the classical form of interest rate adjustments. Because they don't know that, and this is literally the key, the key ingredient to the credible threat theory, is that people don't know that adjustment of interest rates no longer works. Because they don't know it, the Fed can communicate about those interest rate adjustments and have the same impact on the economy as if they had adjusted the interest rates. That is so important to understand, right? To figure out how, like, to wrap your mind around that concept right there is very difficult, right? But to be able to do it, to be able to look at the classical form of the Federal Reserve's monetary policy and how they would adjust interest rates, to understand what kind of impact that has on the economy, what that would typically mean, and then understand that the communication about that is the true monetary policy, not the rate cuts, but the communication about it. You can see evidence of this through the mainstream media, through the propagandized information. If you want to see the communication about the credible threat, like how that monetary policy is really to be conducted through their speeches or through their words, you got to read the speeches. So there's two communications happening here. You got the one through the mainstream media, the propagandized information, which sounds very familiar and similar to the speeches and communications to the other central bankers out there. There's a lot of the same kind of overlapping information, but it's presented in the mainstream media in a way that is not accurate to the way that they talk to the other central bankers with. And that's important to understand. Why is well, my computer died. I don't know if I have any more information. I was just using it for the light anyway. We'll plug that thing in to see if I charge it up some or something. Anyway, sorry, I totally dominated this entire thing. Half an hour. I didn't even read one single comment. You guys are all up here. Good morning. Finally, I've been waiting forever. Oh, Cody, right on, man. It's great to see you here in the morning. All right. Good morning. Morning. Early there. Yes, absolutely. Good morning. When I see a notie from UE, I click right away. Thank you so much. UE with my coffee. Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see you guys here. All right. Okay. What did you think of my PowerPoint? Oh yeah, Cody sent a PowerPoint presentation. It was really cool, man. It's really, I mean, don't mean to like knock it for the simplicity of it. It's really good, just very, straightforward, right to it. And I thought it was a great deal. What I would really like to see is maybe you'd make a video of your PowerPoint presentation. You don't even have to be in the video, just your audio, like, the words, just maybe do an audio and then, show the PowerPoint. But it was a great, quick little presentation on why you should buy silver. And I thought that was really good. Man, I'm losing my light. There we go. Okay. That's okay. It's getting daylight here. Sun will be up here before too long. I would never trust the mainstream media on economic news. They admit they get their talking points directly from the government. Yeah, and this is what's sad about it, is that there's really no other place to go to in order to get information about monetary policy other than the mainstream media. Now, outside of reading their speeches themselves, like literally reading the speeches of the Federal Reserve, there is no other place that I can think of that's going to have the information. I can't think of it. Like, there's literally nowhere else. Anytime I've ever listened to another economist out there or anything else, they're giving maybe good, valid opinions on stuff, but they don't have it right. And what I hear is a whole bunch of regurgitation of the same information that was probably presented to them on the mainstream media. Like, this 2% target thing just blows me away. It literally, like, I'm like, I mean, because I just figured eventually, like, everybody would just kind of just come to the understanding that they weren't going for a 2% target, but they were going for a 2% average inflation rate over time. It was stated 4 years ago. I mean, Powell went right up on stage in front of everybody and said, we are changing the way we view inflation and going for a flexible average inflation targeting, and described it, said it one time. Everybody heard it. Nobody took it to heart. Nobody remembered. It was just like, I'm like, why am I the only one who like said, you just changed? I'm gonna remember that you said that. I'm gonna remember you said that. And I did, and I'm like, that's going along with the credible threat theory that I had before he even said it. Right? Because I had this credible threat theory long ago. Like, I got that credible threat theory from that Ben Bernanke speech. I don't even know how long ago I read that thing. Right? So the credible threat theory has been rolling around in my head for a very long time. And as the pandemic kicked in and all the stuff started happening, I was just like, oh man, they are rolling this stuff out. You know, you think about it, like that corporate debt lending facility, that was probably one of the most brilliant communicated tools in the history of economics. Like, I don't know why that is not studied even more. It was probably one of the most incredible things ever. You think about it. How do you fund all these corporations without pissing the people off something awful? You think about it. Anytime a corporation gets bailed out, the people lose their mind. Taxpayers are just livid over this idea. So here you are in the middle of a pandemic. You got to bail out all these corporations because, hell's about ready to break loose, and everybody's going to, the whole economy is going to absolutely crash and burn if you can't bail out these corporations. But bailing out the corporations means, like, political suicide. How do you do it? Oh, well, what happened was, right? Because, I mean, like, you can come up with all kinds of plans and ideas, but what really happened is that the Treasury and the Federal Reserve stepped up. They had, what was it, Federal Act of 13.3, which gives them an unusual and exigent circumstances the ability to set up a special purpose vehicle, an entity that is separated from the Fed and the Treasury. This entity was funded with hundreds of billions of dollars, literally hundreds of billions of dollars during the pandemic, and then the announcement about how they were going to go out there and buy corporate debt. They were going to be buying the bonds, the junk bonds out there of corporations. This is what everybody knew and believed, and I know I was one of them. I had videos that I was talking about this very thing, saying, man, the Federal Reserve is going to be picking the winners and losers. This is completely illegal. If it wasn't for the unusual and exigent circumstances, this would never take place. This would not be allowed. All right? This whole idea of setting up this special purpose vehicle, this SPV, when funding it with hundreds of billions of dollars, this would be an absolute illegal operation to be taking place during normal times. But the unusual and exigent circumstances of the pandemic has now given them permission to do this. The announcement of setting this special purpose vehicle up was enough to start sparking the market out there to go and front run the Federal Reserve and start buying into the corporate debt. Not to mention, the Federal Reserve had taken the Treasury yields down to zero with their quantitative easing, leaving very little places for the market to participate as far as a return on their capital investment. So when they went to go and look for a fixed income that was safe, the Treasury wasn't it. It was at zero with yields. Now they got corporations being guaranteed to be purchased by the Fed. Wow, the markets now have a backer. Like, they can buy into this market knowing that they can have a place to unload these bonds without any concern. All of a sudden, the market starts flooding into corporate bonds. The Fed and the Treasury hardly buy any with that special purpose vehicle. It literally sat empty. Right? They bought a little bit to establish the credible threat. That was it. Right? After that, that lending facility was hardly used. Even before they got that thing set up with all the funding, the corporations already got funded. Like, the market was like so excited about this special purpose vehicle being set up that they ran out there and literally funded all these corporations before that entity was even established. That's how well the credible threat theory works. It's like, it works too good, right? To the point that that nobody even knows that it exists. And that's what's so awesome for the Federal Reserve. Like, we look at the Federal Reserve and like, oh man, what a bunch of bumbling idiots over there, right? I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen that out there, and yet they were able to pull this off. Huh. Yeah, they're real stupid, all right. I mean, all right. Economic Ninja has an upcoming lumber price video. He's a little late. Yeah, you think? I mean, yeah, why don't you come out after all the information has already been presented out there? I mean, how many lumber videos have I been doing for the last month or 2 or 3 or 5 years? Like, I have been putting it out there constantly. Keep your eye on this. This is the thing. Watch this. And everybody was like, boring. Man, that's boring. There ain't nothing exciting. I want to hear about how my whole world is going to come to an end and my life is going to be over. And if I don't, you know, follow this particular theory of understanding, then my whole world is going to burn up, right? I mean, this is like, God, that stuff is so frustrating out there because I know what's going to happen, right? All the information, there's going to be people who have lumber videos out there that get 1 million views. They're going to be way more popular than mine, and they're going to talk about how the greed and manipulation and destruction and like separation and making you poor and keeping you poor, and it's all going to be proved through the lumber industry. And those videos are going to absolutely kill it out there. They're going to be making so much money off of those videos and those ad revenues and the sponsorships because of how many views they get with their fear-mongering, just completely delusional idea of what it is that's happening out there. But you'll see it. I mean, I know. I mean, I'm already seeing it. I'm already talking about how the retail prices of lumber is gouging because the price of futures have dropped. And I'm thinking, do you have any idea on how this works? Like, just because the futures price dropped, do you think immediately all these lumber yards ran right out and bought cheap lumber so that they could go and retail it for a cheaper price? They're all sitting on expensive lumber. Lumber doesn't move right now. The demand for it is in the toilet. If you cannot move that lumber, then cheap lumber can't come into the system. It's all expensive lumber that's sitting in there right now. And that's the reason why. I mean, what do you, like, the retailer needs to go out of business so that, so that you can get cheaper lumber? Is that what it is? Because that's what would end up eventually happen. I mean, I'm reading articles talking about the British Columbia area, and I'm reading again the devastating, there was 10,000 jobs lost in the lumber industry in 2023 in the British Columbia area. 10,000 jobs gone from the British Columbia area in the lumber forestry industry in 2023. Devastation has been taking place within the lumber industry. Does that sound like greed and manipulation taking place? I don't think so. But, for 1 million views, I guess I could probably go and put out a propagandized greed and manipulation video and talk about how the whole world is burning down around you and it's their fault over there for some, it's just so frustrating. It's so frustrating to see because I understand and see it for what the reality is, right? How many times, this is the thing, like, if there was ever an economist or anybody out there, a YouTuber or somebody who says, get your money out of the bank, get out of cash, get gold, do something of that nature, you should stop listening to them, right? You should stop listening to them if that's what they told you need to do because they were wrong. Did you need to get your cash out of the bank? Maybe a couple of banks. Were you really concerned about having your cash in the bank? Yeah, why? Because of those people and their propagandized information. See, if you had been following the Federal Reserve, you would have known that they had lifeboats prepared to deal with the banking crisis that was coming. They talked about it a year ahead of time, right? They knew that situation was going to come. I don't think they knew exactly what that would look like, but they knew that there was going to be a situation coming that was going to be similar to the Silicon Valley banking crisis. And the reason why I was asked about it, right? They were like, what do you think? Should we get our cash out of the system? People realized they could see that there was going to be issues happening within the big banks, Right? And I said, yeah, we probably should. I mean, there's reason to believe that there's going to be a banking crisis coming. But to be honest with you, so does the Federal Reserve, and they're not going to let it just crash, and they have lifeboats. So now, if somebody was to ask me, dude, are you really like going to depend upon a lifeboat? Yeah, I am. Right? Because I don't have everything tied up inside of that ship. Right? I got a small portion of what it is going on there. Right? And I don't believe that it's going to sink. I believe some of it might sink, but I don't believe the whole thing will. And I really do honestly believe that the Federal Reserve had very much positioned themselves to deal with the banking crisis because that bank term funding program was launched immediately. They knew it. They had it. They're like, okay, banking crisis ready. This is like ready to go. So it's like, it wasn't a surprise. It wasn't a surprise to them, and it wasn't a surprise to me. I mean, it was a surprise to the level and all the stuff that was taking place. Like, wow, that was, it was intense, but it wasn't like out of the realm of what I feel that the Fed thought was going to be a possibility. And I know this because of the bank term funding program launched immediately. Like they were ready, And I'm not trying to praise the Fed. What I'm trying to say is that they're not as stupid as everybody seems to want to think they are. And because everybody thinks they're stupid, that gives them the ability to work the way they do. See, if people understood it in the fashion that I do, the Fed would fail. Like literally, this is how you beat the Federal Reserve, is to understand it to the level that I do. Because then we would all be making decisions that would literally make them it would make them like give them the inability to conduct themselves at all. Right. So as I hear all these people say, end the Fed, fight the Fed, screw the Fed, all this other stuff, they're doing things that actually promote the Fed's ability to continue to conduct themselves. Every time they say that inflation is going to kill you, hyperinflation, they don't know what they're doing, all this other stuff, every one of those type of statements only benefits the Federal Reserve and their ability to conduct themselves into the future. That's the saddest part about all of this, is that as somebody who has ultimately been on every side of the camp of everything, right? Broke, had nothing but gold and no cell phone. Like I had silver and gold and no cell phone and nothing else, and I would hardly work for, I'd just pay my bills, and I would trade everything from cash back into gold because I was so worried about the cash system. Then I realized that I missed out on all kinds of opportunity and gains and stocks and stuff like that. And I thought, well, maybe, just maybe, it might be a good idea to not only just have the silver, but to also have maybe a little bit of stocks, right? In certain areas, maybe like mining stocks or something like that. This is what got me into it. The more I realized that I was missing out on opportunities because I was so pissed off about how this fiat currency system and how the government works and all the other stuff, that I was like literally depriving my life from enjoyment and fun and all the awesomeness that the world can provide. I was literally restricting it from myself because I wouldn't participate in the system because I was so pissed off about it. Right? So I realized, okay, I have to look at this thing differently. I have my protection. I have my security. I have my ability to try and invest. I have my skills. I have all these separate things. Right? Let's build them up individually. That way, if any one individual thing gets hurt or damaged, it doesn't take everything down, right? So you build up a good career, you build up a good savings, you build up a good, personal possessions, you build up, all the skills, all the stuff, right? And that's what you do, is you participate in the economy in the best way that you can for yourself. Because there's nobody out there. People are going to say, hey, man, you shouldn't be in the stock market. It's going to crash. You're a fool for being in real estate. You do all this other stuff. Yeah, they don't live your life, bro. At the end of the day, they're not going to come and say, oh, man, that was the wrong decision. Let me help you out, man. Let me give you hundreds of thousands of dollars for the mistake. That's not going to happen. So you on your own, right? You can take that information and say, man, that guy really seems to know what he's talking about. He was very assertive and strong and aggressive when he said it, so he must know what he's talking about. Right? I better follow that rule. I better follow that thing. And then what? And then you never hear from them again. Now you don't know what to do because you were listening to somebody else's opinion instead of listening into yourself. And that's the truth of it all. All right, guys, what time is it? 5, almost 5:30. Good Lord. Going off for an hour this morning. This is awesome. All right. What's up, Oakland? Oh, thanks for reading the live comments. Yeah. How do we do that when they're counterfeiting? Well, Corey, just understand that they are in the understand that they're counterfeiting. That pisses you off because it loses you see your dollar value dropping, right? So your purchasing power diminishes. Well, then don't look at cash as a purchasing power that should be held, right? See, you want it to hold purchasing power. I want it to hold purchasing power. The neighbors want it to hold purchasing power. It doesn't do it. It doesn't hold purchasing power. It's not doing that. It's not going to. And to wish and hope and dream and pray that it should or believe that it could is inaccurate. It doesn't do it. It just simply won't, right? So it's better to understand that I need to take this cash and immediately convert it over to something else. Because what is it? Currency. It's meant to carry my skills, my job, my product to other skills, products, whatever, right? But it's not going to hold its value. It doesn't retain its purchasing power. It has to immediately transfer. Now, you could take an opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to hold on to this because I believe that there is purchasing opportunities or buying opportunities coming into the future. And so I'm going to take advantage by holding on to this for the time being for that advantage. But the idea that I'm going to hold on to this to save for the future is not going to work. It's just not going to work, right? Now, we can wish it would. We can believe that it did in the past. We can have people who tell us that it should. It doesn't do it. So throw the idea away. All right? It doesn't do that. Take the money and convert it over to something else. Get it into Bitcoin, gold, silver, stocks, bonds, guns, ammo, food, rebuilding your house, whatever, right? But don't hold on to the cash if you're worried about it losing its purchasing power, right? That's then you don't have to be concerned about that anymore. Because the idea says, I want this to hold on to the purchasing power. I want it to be able to save into the future and do all that other stuff. Ain't going to happen. So you can wish and hope and dream and pray. Won't take place, right? And you'll be standing there on your own going, man, this sucks for me because you made the wrong decision, right? You wished that it would do something that it doesn't do, you know? And again, whatever history or rules or whatever, you can come in and say, hey, man, this is the way it should be. Yeah, it very well should be that way, but it isn't. I've been working since I was 15. I'm 26 next week and had to move back in with my parents last year. I don't spend money on anything except for food and nicotine. Well, there you go. Nicotine's a huge one, bro. I remember when I smoked, I smoked Camel 99s because they were in a hard pack, right? I drove forklift, and so I'd always smoke without, I didn't hold the cigarette. The cigarette always dangled from my mouth, right? And so the Camel 99s had a longer butt. That was nice. So I'd sit there and smoke those cigarettes while driving forklift, and I would smoke a pack a day, and I would flick those cigarettes, and wherever they landed, they landed. I was a horrible smoker. I hated it, right? I absolutely hated it. When I quit smoking, a pack of Camel 99s were $1.95. All right, I gave it up when they were cheap. And at that time, I said I wasn't going to pay $2. I wasn't going to pay $60 a month to smoke. I thought that was just absolutely ridiculous to pay $60 a month to smoke. Okay. At the time, I was making maybe $50 a day. So it was an entire day's worth of wages that would go into smoking, and that was just too much for me. So I look back on that as probably one of the biggest benefits in my entire life was to give up nicotine fairly early. I gave that up probably in my mid-20s, I'm guessing. Mid to late 20s is when I gave up cigarettes and chewing. I used to chew too. Damn bugs. Anyway, so the amount of money that you can save just in that, if you were to just roll that at 26, if you were to take that nicotine money and put it into a compounding interest calculator at 10%, and you go for the next, well, let's see, you're 26, so take it up for the next 40 years, right? Take it till you're 66 years old, and you will be blown away by how much money you would have. I mean, like right there, that could be pretty close to your retirement, literally going up in smoke or spit, depending on which way you're going with it. All right. Corey, in my opinion, it was great, but since last year they stopped hiring, I started going to school for cybersec learning, Linux, Python, Java, C, and now nobody gets hired. Hard to get your foot in the door since Fed raised rates and tech did massive layoffs. Yeah, I'm getting to the point where the Nick is getting old. Good for you, man. Agree, same situation here. Tony Benson and Hedges in the UK are about $22 to $23 a pack. Don't know how people spend that much on burning things. Yeah. You know, not to mention, the last time I smoked a cigarette, I got so sick. Like, I didn't realize how, like, I smoked, I mean, I was dizzy, I was messed up, I was so high, I felt like throwing up, and I felt crappy for the rest of the day, and I could taste it, and I was like, God, man, I used to like this. I mean, I used to, like, do this all day. Like, from the time I got up till the time I went to bed, I thought this was awesome. God, how could it was horrible. All right. All right, I've been bitching this whole time, but you're right. I could start budgeting on the Nick. Yep, absolutely. Like you think about it, I mean, you can go and Google it. Compounding interest calculator, do whatever, $200 a month. How much is your nicotine habit? I mean, it's probably, I'm assuming it's something like that. Put $200 a month into a compounding interest calculator at 10%, if you can find 10%. For the next 40 years, every month, you'd have so much money. And then do this, right? Do this. Punch it in there for the next 40 years. And then take it to 39 years, right? Take it to 39 years and see how much money you'll lose at the end for every year you wait to start, right? Because it's not about the end, it's about when you start. The earlier you start, the more the end means. Like literally, you take, I don't even know what the number will be, but you will take an insane amount of money off the top at the end of the year, literally by changing it from 39 to 40 or from 40 to 39. Keep taking it back. Every year you wait, you are taking literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars away from yourself, depending on how much you want to put in. You put in $200 now, you watch that thing grow. By the time you get 10, 15, 20 years into it, you'll be dropping $1,000, maybe $2,000 a month into that thing. And you'll be watching it grow to some ungodly amount of money, and you'll be thinking, man, it all came from quitting smoking cigarettes. Once you start, once you get on that path, once that's in your mind, once you have that internalized and that's your belief, I guarantee you the universe will start piling it in because that's what it wants. That's what you want, right? Like if you're sitting there thinking, man, my whole world is screwed up and I have nothing and I'm going to have nothing going into the future, that's what the universe is going to provide for you, is a world of nothingness, right? Because that's what you expect. That's what subconsciously you were acquiring, right? Is no opportunities, negatives, and all the other stuff. But if you turn that around and face it the other way and say opportunity flows, all these things come towards me, universe wants me to be abundant, then it starts flowing that way. It just comes to you, you know? And it's literally the energy and the thoughts and the feelings that you are carrying that does it. I know it sounds like woo-woo magic, crystal grip and stuff, but that's really the reality of it. It's how I figured it out from my just doing this, right? Is that there was a time in my life I was broke, loser, drunk, had nothing going on. Like literally nothing, about ready to like lose everything I had at the end of the month. I mean, I was like right down to the very end, and I was like, man, I got to change the way I'm doing things. Quit drinking, quit doing a lot of the stuff, and started focusing on chasing excellence. I knew when I was chasing pleasure and when I was chasing excellence. And so I just pursued excellence. That's it. If it was pleasurable, I'd set it aside. And it was just like, never mind. I'm not doing that. I'm going for excellence. And as I started pursuing excellence, right, everything started to flow in. It took a while. It took a long while. It took years, like literally years and years and years. Yeah, and to the point that I didn't think that anything would ever come. Like I was just like, this is just life, right? But it takes time to repair all the damage, and then it takes time to start building, right? So it's just a matter. It's just literally a matter of time and the way that you feel and carry yourself. Alrighty, guys. Let's see here. 5:30. I think I'm going to call it quits. We're an hour into this video. I think that's probably good. We had a great time here talking this morning, talking about the credible threat theories, talking about how this propagandized information is really misleading. And I really hope that some of the information that I presented today will give you a little bit better, or give you a different approach to what is taking place out there, give you an idea of what it is that the Federal Reserve is trying to communicate. You know, this is the way we do it, is to break this information down just like this, have the conversation about it. For those of you who haven't joined the channel yet, there's a membership to the channel here on YouTube, the YouTube membership. It's $1 a month. It's literally just $1. That's it. And you'll have access to all kinds of member-only videos that we have done, breaking down the Federal Reserve speeches. We break down stuff like Basel III Endgame, break down some of the communication styles coming from the Federal Reserve, definitely talking a lot about the monetary policies and, you know, how it is that they plan on conducting themselves going into the future. Understanding this stuff from that point of view gives us a much better understanding of what it is that we need to do personally with our own finances and jobs and careers and voting and business and investments and everything that we're doing. Like literally everything that we do when we conduct ourselves from the time that we get out of bed and move through the day. If you have internalized this information, you will then see things and do things that are going to be better to your advantage, considering that what most people are seeing is misinformation and misunderstandings of what it is that is being conducted out there. You can literally be ahead of the game, like, you know, above and before everybody else. Be able to call out the BS of forward guidance signaling of interest rate cuts that came at the end of last year. How many people were convinced, right? Not me. I was one of the few people who were like, this is not reality. You know, this is just some, you know, delusional propagandized information that shouldn't be taken seriously. You should watch it to understand what it is that they're trying to communicate, because I think that's important, you know, what it is that they're actually trying to get out there, but to understand that that's not the truth of it, right? The truth of it is really lies within their communications to the other central bankers. And the only way you can find that stuff out is to literally go and read their speeches for yourself, or you can join the channel and join in on some of the videos where we break those speeches down and have a discussion about it so that you can better internalize the information, because it's not easy. I mean, the Federal Reserve talks in kind of a very odd language that once you recognize it, it's not that difficult, but man, if it's new to you, it really sounds like they're speaking in code, because they kind of do, really. Once you understand it, it's not so difficult, but you know, having somebody to be able to break it down and then re-explain it in a way that is like normal speaking is so helpful. And I've had a lot of people, you know, thank me for doing those videos, and I thank you for joining the channel. It's incredible. We're up to just shy of 900 members to the channel. I would love to see it up at 10,000. I think 10,000 members to the channel is like an awesome goal to try and achieve. So if you're already a member to the channel, thank you very much. If you're not a member to the channel, considering becoming a member to the channel. And you know, one of the things that I found that I thought was really cool and interesting about it is that a lot of the members of the channel are now gifting memberships to other viewers of the channel who are not members yet. So it's kind of like this paying it forward sort of thing, where the community is growing exponentially, almost forcefully, right? Like not even by the viewer's choice almost, but then again, it kind of is, you know, in the sense that the community is now growing on its own. Like they're making it happen out there, so to speak. So thank you very much for all the people who are been buying memberships for the other members out there and gifting those memberships out. I really appreciate you helping the channel grow like that. So Alrighty, guys. Thank you all for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day at work. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.